U.S. President Barack Obama is using some strong language in his ongoing response to that shooting rampage at a church in South Carolina, namely the N-word. He used it in a podcast as part of a wider discussion on race relations in the United States. The podcast was recorded Friday, but it aired today. It's available online. We would typically bleep out that word, but given the context of how it was used and who was saying it, you will hear it now. Let's listen to the discussion that led up to that point and what came after.
Racism, we are not cured of.
Clearly.
And it's not just a matter of it not being polite to say nigger in public. That's not the measure of whether racism still exists or not. It's not just a matter of overt discrimination. Societies don't overnight completely erase everything that happened 200 to 300 years prior.
The president has talked about race before, but not in this way, so it got a lot of attention. But will it prompt reflection or even change? Let's talk about that. I'm joined by two commentators with personal and political stakes in this topic. Sam Fullwood is with the Center for American Progress. It's a liberal think tank. He joins me from Washington. And joining me from Pittsburgh, Lenny McAllister, a Republican commentator who once ran for Congress under the GOP banner. Okay, let's talk about this. The first question to you, Lenny McAllister. What was your reaction when you heard the president use that word?
It was tactful, it was appropriate, it was calculated, and to further this discussion, it really highlights where we are when it comes to race relations in America. I think that many times when it comes to race, we talk about the niceties, we talk about the things on the surface, but we don't talk about what's underneath the surface, what is keeping us divided. I talk about this a lot here in the city of Pittsburgh as well, and I talk about this nationally. It's one thing to talk about the things that people can see on the surface, the very easy things to go after. We don't have these type of violent attacks. We don't say these type of words in public anymore. That's one thing. But to go after the systematic, and President Obama said this, the institutional aspects of racism. When you start talking about the academic numbers, the employment numbers, the economic numbers, that's where we stay divided. And if we don't fix that and don't have those conversations in regards to the impact of race in America in those capacities, we will stay divided and we will be weakened as a nation as a result.
Sam Fullwood, do you agree?
I agree maybe with 50% of what he says. I think that the president was using the word for impact and to get attention. Where I guess I disagree is I would have preferred that he had not used it, not because I'm offended by the word, but because it becomes a sideshow to the other message that he was trying to get across. I mean, we are here now talking about the N-word and not about what the president really was talking about. And I think his message really is about all of the other things, the institutional forms of racism. Those are the issues that we really need to be talking about. But when you throw out an inflammatory word or when you make a sensational statement, people glom onto that, and the real message, I think, gets lost in the hubris of the attention-grabbing soundbite.
Lenny, do you think the message is lost?
No, it's not lost, and it's not hubris, and it's not sensationalized. What he did, though, is he made it very crystal clear. This is what we accept as taking on racism, not saying these words, not having these sentiments in public places, denouncing things such as the Confederate flag. But we're not really going after what's real, and sometimes you have to highlight this in very real terms, and nobody wants to have the very real conversation for risk of offending somebody or doing things that we just don't do because we're too polite and too PC in 2015 America. That is what he was going after. He was going after breaking down that wall. Some may call that sensationalized. I would actually say that President Obama was being courageous and calculated with this, and I commend him for doing it in this instance.
Calculate.
It's great that someone would say that, but the real issue is, had he not used the N-word, this conversation right now would never be taking place. And
that's the point, Sam.
And all of the issues that the president is really trying to emphasize, people like you and like me have been talking about, and it goes into nothingness. The fact that everybody is talking about the N-word, no one's really talking about the real issues. They're talking about whether the president was appropriate or not. And I think that tends to be the sensational part, the sideshow part. I think it is courageous to have these discussions, but every time he has these discussions, he gets lambasted by a lot of people. And now it's it's just because of this word that people are focusing on, not the real issue.
It's not this. No, I disagree with that. Let's go back to 2012 when President Obama said, "If I had a son, he would look like Trayvon." That illustrated what black men go through in America. He could have said it in a less dramatic way, and people would not have had the real conversations about we really do have an African-American president. For him to say it in the way that he did, this allows us to have a contrasting conversation in the full context of what people are actually thinking and in the ways that they're actually behaving in 2015 America when it comes to race relations. You have to be able to break down that wall with a sledgehammer of truth, and he picked up that sledgehammer, and he really made us faces one-to-one versus being nice and moving around the corners and not getting into the conversation. You're right, Sam. If he did not use that word, we would not be talking about this podcast, and we likely would not be talking about the real aspects of racism. We would likely be talking about the Confederate flag, not institutional racism in America.
Okay, I just want to pause you there, and Sam, don't worry, I'm going to give you the first word when we come back, because a couple of things about this. We'll talk about the reason that he chose that particular podcast. We'll also talk with the both of you there about the word and which audience he was going after when he used it. But also, I want to try something else out on you, and that's the idea that, you know, Hillary has often talked about human rights. So what if she had taken women's rights? What if she had taken the same approach and used the C word with the same ideas behind it? You know, would it fly as well? So I want to ask you about that. Controversial, I know, coming up in just a moment. Stay with us. Okay, let's return to our discussion, a renewed discussion in the U.S. today about the issue of race, prompted by President Obama using the N-word in an interview. I'll reintroduce my guest, Sam Fullwood of the Center for American Progress, a liberal think tank. He is on your right. He is in Washington. In Pittsburgh, Lenny McAllister, a Republican commentator who once ran for Congress under the GOP banner. All right, Sam, I want to begin with you and let's talk about where the president chose to deliver this message, the word he used. Was he trying to tap in a younger generation of Americans, perhaps a younger generation that's used to hearing this word every day, either in inoffensive circumstances or music circumstances, whatever? But do you think that he was deliberately going after a younger generation?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not privy to their media strategy to know what audience he was trying to get. I do think he was deliberately using it, and the president has often used alternative media to get out messages to different audiences, and perhaps that is exactly what he was attempting to do here, was to segment the audience and to get it. I think his choice of using the word, however, was calculated, as Lenny said, to be able to generate attention. I think that we now live in a social media culture where getting attention is just as important as saying anything of substance. What the president said of substance, I'm all for. I'm not so crazy about using sensational tactics to be able to try to drive your message. Maybe it works. Maybe I'm completely wrong about this. And maybe because the president used that word in that audience, in that venue, people are now magically going to start taking seriously the subject of race and racism in America. But I doubt it. Is
there any circumstance, Sam, where it's okay to use that word, in your opinion?
I have no problems at all with the use of the word. That is not my issue. My issue is his ability to be able to communicate whatever message it is that he's using it. If a rapper wants to use that word in a rap song, he has every right, by my way of thinking, for him to do that. The word does not, words don't offend me. It's the way in which people are communicating and the messaging. That's what's the important part. And that gets lost when we start debating over using one word or another.
So you have no problem with a rapper using this word, but the President of the United States talking to white America and telling white America, listen, just because you don't use this word in public anymore does not mean that we have truly overcome when it comes to race in America. Look at the dynamics in regards to education. Look at the healthcare dynamics. Look at the employment dynamics. Look at all the key parameters that we look at in America. Just because we don't use this word does not mean we have eradicated racism. We have overcome 50 years of progress we can see, we can look back at, but we're nowhere near where we should be. And to use that word to illustrate that point in a very clear manner, you have a problem with that, but a rapper doing it's just First Amendment rights. That seems to be completely confusing, and for the president to use it in this manner is courageous, not sensationalized. It has prompted a conversation, and it is done in a very clear prism.
Let me ask Sam your response to that.
No, I think he's deliberately distorting what I'm saying. What I am saying is that I don't have a problem with the use of the word in certain contexts. But if you're trying to communicate a very serious topic, this word becomes the point of the conversation and not the topic. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, let me try this out on both of you, because sometimes it can help to look at something in different circumstances. Hillary Clinton has often talked about women's rights. Similar conversation when Obama came onto the scene. Can a woman be president of the United States? Will it fly? What if she says, something like, let me look at it here. It's not just a matter of it not being polite to say the C word in public. That's not the measure of whether sexism still exists or not. It's not just a matter of overt discrimination. We have societies that don't overnight completely erase everything that happened 200 or 300 years prior. Is it still not okay? Still okay to use it then?
For example, if Hillary Clinton, I don't know about the C word, but let's replace the C word with the B word. Okay. It would express the same exact sentiment. Hey, folks, just because you don't call a strong woman in the workplace a B does not mean that you're okay with seeing strong women take charge in certain situations. It doesn't mean that many pockets of America are ready to see a woman as the first woman president of the United States of America. It would be 100% accurate, and she would also once again be highlighting some of the still challenges, or the challenges that are still out there when it comes to sexism in America. And I would stand behind that comment as well.
I think Lenny has just proven my point. He backed off of the C word because he knows that would be a distraction to her message.
But no, Sam, that's not what people would call women. They don't call strong women that word in the workplace when they're leaders. But what word did they usually?
You're proving my point. The more you talk, the more you're proving the point that I'm making.
Sam, no.
That the language that you use can become a distraction for what you're trying to get across. And you've proven my point. You backed off of a strong word that would offend a lot of people, that would take away from the message.
I put it into a scenario. I put it into a scenario that people actually use. They don't usually use the C word about women, but generally speaking, if you did a poll, the word that they call strong women in certain situations is not the C word, it's the B word. And that's why I put it into a context of a real situation that many, many women, unfortunately, even in 2015, go through.
I can tell you, without a poll here to prove it, but I can tell you as a woman that the C word is used quite frequently for the similar sentiments as the B word, depending on where you are. So, what about Sam's point that sometimes a word is just too incendiary to use because it takes away from everything that's being said around it, Lenny?
that goes back to whether or not that person's being a statesman or a stateswoman at that point in time. If you're trying to highlight a very real point that people will dance around, and when it comes to race in America, we dance around these issues way too often. When it comes to sexism in America, we dance around these issues way too often. When it comes to bashing people based on sexual orientation, we dance around these issues way too often. So if you're in a stately position and you have one shot to make that point, to generate a very real conversation and bring about substantive change, sometimes you just have to take that shot. We've seen this in the 60s,
right.
We've seen this in the 50s. It's not the first time this has ever happened in America.
And I'm going to call it for time. I want to thank you both so much. Sam Fullwood in Washington with the Center for American Progress. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you for having me.
And Lenny McAllister, Republican commentator in Pittsburgh. Lenny, thank you.
Thank you, Carol. God bless you both.
Same to you. More news next here on CBC News Network.